Good afternoon. Today we'll be discussing Thomas Gray's Elegy written in a country churchyard, which was perhaps completed in 1750 and published in 1751. The origins of the poem are unknown, but it was partly inspired by Gray's thoughts following the death of the poet Richard West in 1742. Clearly, the poem is an elegy in name, but surely not an elegy in form. It employs a style similar to that of contemporary odes, but it's an elegy in essence because it embodies a meditation and a remembrance after death. For our easier understanding, the poem can be divided into 7 thematic parts: the initial tone and setting, the speaker's defense of the poor and insistence upon the futility of riches in keeping one from death, the difficulty of being successful if one is poor, the danger of being successful if one is rich or fortunate, the universal longing for some human memorial as seen among the poor, the speaker's acceptance of his lot forms the final drift of the poem, and this is appended to what we understand as the epitaph, in which the speaker's earned resolution is projected in the future as an emblem of his newly won control and understanding of death. As the poem opens, we see that no one in particular is being mourned. Instead, the speaker is examining his own thoughts in or near a country churchyard, the ancient burial ground for the humble poor of the village, and as we later see, the ultimate resting place of the speaker himself. But it soon becomes clear that the speaker is, on one hand, like the humble rural living and dead in their obscurity, and painfully unlike them in his discontent, and that he is really mourning his own repressed potential. The opening 4 stanzas consistently show his separation from his environment. He is a living man in the home of the dead, a poetic man in a town of farmers and rustic people, a man who attempts to see through the sun is setting and tries to understand its essence, and a man who understands the ancient solitary rule of the owl in the church tower. He is, in short, alone in a world that he does not accept, and essentially that does not also accept him. And that is why perhaps he says those immortal lines, "The ploughman homeward plods his weary way and leaves the world to darkness and to me." The speaker's distance from those seemingly mourned is reiterated in the following section of the poem, where we once again hear "there and these, but now with a new ring." These lines do not offer the conventional reconciliation to death that even Crane seemed to have thought was there. For one thing, the speaker is not ready for such a reconciliation. For another, he is still apologetic, both for the poor in general and for himself in particular. And he says, "Nor you, ye proud, impute to these the fault. If memory o'er their tomb no trophies raise, where through the long drawn aisle and fretted vault, the pealing anthem swells the note of praise." The speaker's desire for an elaborately mourned death rather than a lowly bed, which is essentially forgotten with time, is made even clearer in the 3rd section of the poem, where, though he says the paths of glory lead but to the grave, The speaker solaces his existence not with realizations of the universal end of man, but with how grand he and those around him might have been if not for external constraints. Perhaps he realizes that flattery cannot soothe the dull, cold year of death, but it can soothe the life of those unjustly limited by society, circumstances, and immediate environment. The earlier alienation from his surroundings again appear in the final lines of this section, where he says, "Full many a gem of purest ray serene, the dark unfathomed caves of ocean bear. Full many a flower is born to blush unseen, and waste its sweetness on the desert air." It is in this section that the emotionally spurious, as some would say, line regarding the paths of glory leading to the grave, initiates the poem's true movement towards some form of a reconciliation between the poet and the inevitability of death. The poet says, if one might be Milton, one might also be a corrupt court poet. If one has money to do some good, one might also have money to do some evil. And if one ruled a nation, one might have been forced or have elected to wade through slaughter to a throne and shut the gates of mercy on mankind. The speaker realizes that obscurity, not circumscribed alone, dare and his own growing virtues, but their crimes confined. To end honestly, before the speaker wholly appreciates the full connotations of the inability of the emblems of worldly success to recall death or bind the generations in social and theological harmony. He must bridge the distance between the me of line 4 in the poem and the they of numerous lines. He begins to do this, as I understand, through his realization that all men might be diabolic as well as angelic when tempted by opportunity. He learns to characterize ambition not as a benevolent sway of the empire, but as the madding crowd's ignoble strife. He takes another step when he looks for a common denominator of rich and poor, good and bad, and finds essentially that it is not in the fact of death, but the fact of remembered life and the consequent links between classes and generations that ultimately matter. The rhymes near him are uncouth, he says, the tombstones frail and the statuary shapeless, but they do function as protection from insult. They mark off a holy burial ground and insist that the person has not been forgotten and implore the passing tribute of a sigh. The speaker's view of the humble dead and hence of the humble living is changing. He had felt that memory owed a tomb no trophies raise. He now feels that the frail memorial is still erected nigh and reaches out to every passing visitor. He had felt that it was a fault that pealing anthems did not swell the note of praise for the poor. He now feels it proper that the unlettered mouse is at work, and many a holy text around she strews that teach the rustic moralist to die. In the process of reading such rustic poetry, the speaker himself has been instructed, has learned to find the proper way of living, dying, and gaining immortality. The epitaph's final stanza makes clear that he now is beyond such dangerous impertinence as deserving and demanding immortality. Heaven has recompensed him with its own and with human friendship, not for his worldly achievement, but for his sincerity of soul, spiritual bounty, sympathy for his fellows, and the ability to discover and adhere to the divine will. He lived or projected a humble life, and like other rustic moralists, learned to die by reading holy texts, in his case supplemented by poetry rather than other learned tracts. The poem finally looks to the grave and through the grave to eternity and immortality, and does so because the speaker has abjured his desire for personal fulfillment, really self-aggrandizement and power, which is as likely to produce merciless as merciful acts. Though he is never a joyful member of the village's life, he uses his active mind and learns to resign himself to ordinary human affection. He associates himself with his neighboring humble people and landscape, and in the process leaves the definition of his hidden true character to God. Ironically enough, through this surrender, he also improves his character, cools his moral fever, and changes his focus from choice of life, which is limited, to the choice of eternal living. The poem, which begins as an elegy for the speaker's unfulfilled promise, ends as an elegy, now appropriately written in a country churchyard, for a man who learns to accept and praise his limited world and its people, and thus hopes to be accepted and praised in the limitless world of God and God's people. So this is essentially what this elegy is about. And as we go through the texts section-wise, we find that continuous struggle of the poet or the poetic persona to come to terms with two conflicting, apparently conflicting motives, one of death and the other of immortality. And the poem is intriguing to us even today, largely because it tempts us to negotiate and renegotiate this contrary, death and immortality.